probably 2016,
Okay.
2017 era.
Uh-huh.
The world was different, obviously.
Yeah.
Wireless was different.
Sure.
At that time, and probably it still is, and I'm just not as keen to it, it was kind of a magical thing of wireless charging. And like many technological advances, like I can say for certain, the phone I had in my pocket wasn't something I could sit somewhere and charge.
Yeah, not then.
And if it was, there probably wasn't a place available to sit and charge. Fast forward to today, it's a technology that, from a consumer standpoint, is ubiquitous. Might be too strong of a word, but there's kind of expectations on the market, like just like the internet and Wi-Fi. My favorite thing is when people complain about the internet on the airplane. I'm like, you are surfing every print known to humankind while you're going.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. So I would imagine your world has changed significantly since then. Would love to get into things with just kind of an overview of NuCurrent, how, some of the product services, where you fit in today's environment. And I think it also be interesting just to understand what is the wireless environment today. What are some of the big challenges? Yeah. What are some of the things that you're working through? Maybe we can start there and just talk about the business. That would be awesome.
Yeah, sure. So we met, I'll believe you, in 2016. And so to you, that's the beginning of the story. But to me, it goes back to 2009 when I was at Northwestern Law School, and it was a class project. And so, even between 2009 and 2016, where you're reflecting on like the landscape at that time was still a nascent, wireless charging was nascent, relatively unknown. At that moment in time, Samsung would have had their phones with wireless charging, and maybe even Google would have had one, but Apple hadn't done it yet. Like the next year is when they were going to start. And so that was still a nascent period. And in many ways, interestingly, it's still a relatively nascent industry. It really depends how you choose to segment what you're talking about. So if you want to talk about it from the purview of wireless power technology, I mean, there's billions of devices in the market that have wireless power, so that's not nascent.
Right.
But if you want to look at it by actual end product segments, really phones, there's probably about half a billion phones a year that ship with wireless charging. It's a pretty saturated, mature market, but there's a lot of other electronic devices that are just starting to, like, we think about these as waves hitting the shore, and they keep rolling. Okay. So the mobile phones have already hit the shore. The earbud cases have already hit the shore.
Yeah.
Wearables are hitting the shore, but they're still, like, Garmin just put out their first watch in a long time that has wireless charging. Fitbit still doesn't. Whoop does. And so there's a mix there. That wave is kind of approaching the shore right now. People are starting to surf it. It's not crashed yet.
Yeah.
And then, like, an area I'm so excited about is smart glasses.
Okay.
And I think it's going to majorly disrupt consumer electronics as we know them, and commercial electronics too, for like workers. But those, like, the most popular ones out right now are the Ray-Ban Metas.
Yep.
And they're awesome. Have you used them?
No, but they're the first ones I've seen that I'm like, I would put those on my face.
You got to try them. Like, even just go into a Lens Crafters and try them. And I'm not pitching our stuff. We're not in those because they currently use pin-based charging. So it's physical charging. It's the old way of doing it. There's a plus and a minus physical port, and you plug them in. It's kind of, that wave is going to develop for wireless charging, because what's really cool about smart glasses and why it's going to disrupt consumer electronics and potentially displace mobile phones. I mean, that's Mark Zuckerberg predicts that. He said by 2030, there will be more smart glasses than mobile phones. It'll replace them.
Yeah.
And, I don't know if the timeline's right or the exact ratio is right, but I think that the idea is right for two big reasons. One is, from a first principles perspective, these glasses, they sit on your eyes, your ears, your nose, your mouth, right next to your brain. So it's much closer to your entire nerve center and your sensations than in your pocket. Like, if you could choose, and I could say the tech works on your face or in your pocket, and you're vying for attention and you're vying for usage, and you always want to be, like, if you're a Apple, Samsung, Google, whoever, you want to be on the face, right?
Right.
So that's where they want to be. So that's reason one. And then reason number two is so many people wear glasses already. It's already like over 2 billion people in the world wear glasses every day. And there's a convergence of technologies that are allowing it to shrink and become invisible. So if I told you these were smart glasses and they did something that was valuable to you, you would wear them in a second,
Right.
because they look like normal glasses. I mean, you have your own. Actually, can I see yours?
I do, yeah.
So these are a little too small right now for smart glasses, but they'll get there in the next few years. And the way to do that is with miniaturizing technologies. So anyways, there will be a product coming out in January. It's going to be really exciting. We're in it with wireless charging from definitely one of the biggest players in the space.
Very cool.
But going back to your original question, that was a long-winded answer. But going back to your original question, how have things changed? Well, there's a lot more awareness of wireless charging because of things like iPhones. But there are still so many untapped market segments where wireless charging is not just a cool feature like it is for a phone. It's actually really essential to be able to give the customization and flexibility so that my glasses are similar to yours but different.
Right.
And somebody else wears completely different wireframe glasses. And you need to give that personality. Otherwise, people aren't going to wear an iPhone. The only differentiation is the size and the color.
Right.
People won't put that on their face.
No, it's part of their personal expression.
Yeah.
And in fact, talking about the phones,
yeah.
I mean, I've heard people question, like, why don't they just make the phones with cases on them? Like, well, that's the personalization. That's where they drew the line for people, I think.
Yeah, I like that. That's true.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And then also something you said, so technology such as putting the Internet of Things on your face, you have to think about the user experience too. And that's some of the challenges that I've had with thinking, do I really want to, right now I don't think about my glasses except where are they?
Mm-hmm.
Do I need all this other tech? And so, what we'll see in a lot of product development, you think of current behaviors people have. I take these, I set them on my nightstand every day. The US on my nightstand is a wireless charger, right? Yeah. So I think it's cool to think about, naturally I think about things that I charge today, and would it be nicer if I didn't have to?
Yeah. If there's more seamless, maybe you're gonna have to charge them. There's still batteries, but can you do it in a way that's like effortless? Like we did that with HP with their headphones.
Yeah.
So they're real, like it's poly, HP poly. So when you take off the headphones, you just hang them on a hanger, like a nice, beautiful display stand. Yeah. And they charge and they get device firmware updates. So you don't have to think about like, yes, I'll accept the firmware and get updated software. It just does it all for you. So you're still charging, but you're not thinking about it. You're just thinking about taking them off and putting them where they belong.
Right.
And so that's more about how people say like, is there a cord I can cut? Is kind of the first type of questions people ask.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then you get into that second one that you're kind of leading into, which is, if I did have a cut cord, what else could I do?
Right.
Right.
What type of products could I enable? Like, I mean, I guess charging these by plugging them in is possible, and it is how the Ray-Ban Metas work today, the glasses. But this is kind of in the second category, which is like, what cool things can you do in smart glasses if you don't have to have a physical mechanical port anywhere on here?
Yeah.
If all the electronics are embedded inside and invisible, now what cool stuff can you do? And so it kind of flips that question around.
Yeah. Swim goggles.
yeah, absolutely. That'd be good.
In my mind, I'm still waiting for it. I don't drive an electric car, but I think that's also what consumers are all thinking. When do I just park?
Yeah, for sure. There's a good source of distinction for us is we focus on very pretty small things you can carry.
Yeah.
That's a different level of power. It has different challenges like making really miniature electronics. So we don't do the EV charging. There's a company called Witricity that does. I was friends with the former CEO, so I could like recommend them wholeheartedly. I'm not saying good or bad about the new one. I just don't know them. But but I think they're still doing well. They have an adoption curve, question about like how quickly can you get like an OEM, like a Tesla or Ford or whoever, to actually, embed this, or is it just an aftermarket thing? Right. But there's bottom line, if you wanted to pay whatever it costs to do it, you could get it installed and you could just park your Tesla over your charging mat that lays down on your garage. Never have to think about plugging in your car again. So the physics is all there. The technology is there. It's more of an adoption question at this point and go to market question.
Yeah, 100%. That's so interesting. So, okay. So I'm going to dive into NuCurrent because for folks that don't know the business that well, and I was just listening to the past couple of minutes, it sounds like you make glasses and you make technology and all that type of stuff. So would love to know just kind of like your business. What is your role in this space? What is your company's role in this
Yeah.
space? And what are some of the challenges that you're helping people through?
Yeah. Yeah. I like the redirect because it is confusing sometimes. People are like, what are we like? What, you're talking about Whoop, and then you're talking about Honeywell, and then you're talking about HP.
Yeah.
Like, wait, you make all the, are you like IDEO or what do you guys do? And so what we really do better than anyone else in the world is drive innovation around wireless charging technology. And what that usually means is miniaturization, improving the energy efficiency of the technology, which has user experience benefits, like you can charge your glasses faster. It allows the industrial designers to reduce the size that has to be dedicated to the charging, and they can put other stuff there, like a bigger battery, or they can put other sensors there to make it have more functions. So what we do is we work with large companies that are innovators in their markets, like the ones I've mentioned, where they say there's something we want to do better or differently than what the competition is doing in the space, and it involves wireless charging, but like we can't get it done with what's available with basic off-the-shelf solutions. Like they might go to a chip company like an NXP, an Infineon, or Renesas, and they might say, hey, do you have wireless charging? And they say, yes, we do. And they're like, great, we'd like to put it in. And they like hand them a reference design that's this big, the size of a hockey puck. And I did that for your audio audience. So the size of a hockey puck. And then they're like, oh, yeah, but this is smart glasses. How are you going to fit that in here? And they're like, oh, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And so they come to us and they're like, does it really not work? Or can you do it? And we're like, sometimes it doesn't work. Like you're asking for too much. But more often than not, we find ways to make it work. And so we're innovating with these leading edge companies. What we end up doing is we implement our technology that we've developed over the last 15 years. So we have over 400 patents. We have our own internal design tools that's trained on our data for the last 15 years. And what we do is we can really quickly design the solutions for them using our tools, using our technology. And then we give them everything they need to have it built. The design files, the test protocols, the firmware that operates it. We give it to them and you say, this is yours now. You can build it. And when you build it, every time you print one, send us a check for a royalty.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So you guys are doing the first of all, you're taking their big problem, no pun intended, hockey puck size big.
Yeah, right? Sure.
And then they're tapping into your knowledge base, your team's talent, to then say, okay, here's how you do that small. In that example.
Oftentimes it's like solving a size problem is often where we are. It could be other things. It could be reliability. It could be like, hey, we can fit this wireless charger in, but the distance isn't good enough. The efficiency is not good. So it can manifest in multiple ways, but size is a great example.
Okay, that's so interesting. And so then, so I also like to kind of talk through products and services. So that would be one. What that also sounds like, so you're now also giving them the tools, the technology, basically from a revenues, and I'm sure it's different all over the place, but in some circumstances, every time it's used, it's a royalty, to your words. Is that the primary business model?
Yeah.
It is. Okay. Was that always the case for you guys?
No. So when you met us in 2016.
That was a loaded question, because I remember it at one point.
Yeah. And you might have a better memory than I do. On my own company, you definitely have a better memory than I do. I should know my company better though. But back in 2016, though, we really pivoted into this business model around the 2019 timeframe. So pre 2019, there were kind of two big changes in the company. So change number one was when we started at Northwestern, we were very narrowly focused on implants and medical devices. That was the nature of the class. Yeah. And so we just thought we didn't even think that there were other potential customers in the world other than implant device makers. So we started on solving a problem for charging implanted neurostimulators, which are used to treat chronic pain by stimulating the spinal cord, or they can do sleep apnea, deep brain stimulations that helps Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, like super cool stuff. We were just the wireless power portion to get power into the body without harming a human.
Interesting.
So we thought that was what our market was, but it's a slow market. It's a small-ish market.
Yeah.
On the plus side, they sell these devices for, $20,000.
Right.
So it's but still that's just 20 iPhones at a time, and think how many iPhones, and think how many they develop it for 18 months and then it comes to market. And so our first big thing was saying we're not just a med device focused company. We had to lift our eyes up, and we had to be shown by companies like Motorola and Intel and Texas Instruments. Those were kind of the first industry players that said, you've done amazing things in medical device. And in fact, because you've been working in medical device while the rest of us have been working on cell phones, you've been trying to climb Everest and you've gotten up to 18,000 feet. We've just been trying to climb a 5,000 foot hill, and we're at 5,000 feet, but look how far you've gone.
Yeah.
Like, come climb this with us, or show us how to climb these higher mountains.
Yeah.
And so pivoting and saying we can do consumer, industrial, in addition to medical, that was kind of our first big change. So by the time you met us, we were already moving on to some stuff like that. But the business model of what we thought we delivered, what the product was, also had to change. It changed from because of the human body environment we were in. The thing that we were better at that time than anybody was making antennas, coils or inductors. If you kind of went scientifically in nerd order, like you call them inductors, but you can just think of them as antennas. So therefore, that's what we were good at designing. So we figured we had to make them and sell those widgets. And then we're like, man, we're going to get our lunch eaten by large operating companies, especially in China, who are going to be able to operate with much less capital. Mm-hmm. They're going to be really good at building stuff for cheap. It's going to be really good quality. Like, we're going to get in some like multi-$100 million CapEx game to build antennas that are just going to get stolen.
Right.
And so two things we did from there that basically turned into what we do to now is we said, we can't just be good at the antennas, because the antennas are just a very important, maybe the most important part of the system. But like, most companies aren't Motorola. Right. Most companies have smart engineers, but they have other stuff to do. And so they don't want to do a full end-to-end DC into DC out circuit that has power conversion and controls and all this stuff and protocol. They're like, give us the solution. So we had to move up to systems, from components to systems. And then the second thing is, he said, we're not going to build this. Like, we're not going to get in that part of the game. Guess who has better sourcing than us? HP, Logitech, our customers. They have control over their ecosystem. They want to buy from the people they know. They don't want to qualify a new manufacturer like us. So we just said, we're going to do a licensing business. So we're shooting this in TechNexus. Yep. And an absolutely pivotal introduction for our company that led to this change was made here by Fred. I was bitching to him, and I was like, he's like, what do you need for your business, Jacob? And it was probably like when I was talking to you. I'm like, you know what?
Which is a question he asks.
Yeah, like what can I do to help you? He's such a connector, right? What can I do to help you? Like, what do you need? I'm like, you know what? I need someone in Chicago that understands hardware, because everything that's going on in this town right now is all about like social apps.
Sure.
It's all about 1871. No problem with that, by the way. But like, where's my attention? Like, where are the people that know what I need to do? And he's like, well, would you like to meet the chairman of Broadcom? And I'm like, please. And he's like, okay. And he sends a note to John Major, who's the chairman of Broadcom at the time, former CTO of Motorola, former president of Qualcomm. And I only named like 1/4 of his resume now. John comes over to our office. We're like 8 people at the time, I guess. And he comes over and we just talked, and we talked again. And he ended up being an investor and board member in the company, and still is a board member today. And he was basically the one who's like, hey, dummy, use your IP, do what you're good at and give the rest away. So let them build it. You invent, you give them the inventions, let them take it from there. And so that's how we changed.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's so interesting when you can connect with someone that has a different purview, and especially because you're in the category of founder, entrepreneur, innovator, and everything, right? Mm-hmm. And when you're that person, you'd be so close and so passionate about the thing. Yeah. It's like, I'm a business owner myself, and I should say co-owner with Derek, and we always imagine there's some door over here where we knock on that, and they'll say, hey, idiots, you should be doing it this way. Yeah. And really, that's kind of all around us. Mm-hmm. In our networks, and particularly in Chicago. So I'm glad you transitioned to Chicago and TechNexus, because that is a path I definitely want to go down. Sure. Because when we think about the different diversity of the different business types and everything else, I mean, you guys are an absolute example of that.
Yep.
The last person I was talking to is in commercial real estate, right?
Sure.
Obviously that's in Chicago. Wireless technology, maybe a little bit different. And then we've got such a community here, such as TechNexus, which is kind of across the board with startups and venture capital and everything else like that. Then you've got MHub, right, which was back when we first met, maybe not even part of your equation. It's a massive entity now, right? And now we're seeing all the quantum computing and everything else is going on and things like that. So we'd love to know a little bit about how the Chicago ecosystem has played into the success of NuCurrent, or the role that it's had.
Yeah. It's kind of hard to put your finger on it. That I gave you probably one of the most objectively obvious examples of John Major joining our company because of Fred on TechNexus. I mean, Fred's partner, with TechNexus, Terry Howerton. He was also a part of our. We were in TechNexus for, definitely before WeWork, probably in the 2012 timeframe.
Yep.
We had one full-time employee. I was moonlighting, as I was a lawyer, working in a big law firm and then at a private company, and I was building NuCurrent on the side. So we had one full-time employee and and he would use the desk at TechNexus. So got to know Terry, and then through people like that, you just keep kind of building out and meeting new people, and that leads to us meeting Hyde Park Angels, who became an investor at some point. I moved in our first office when we got venture funding in 2014 is when we decided it was time to raise money, because that's when we were like, wait, this isn't just a med device widget. This potentially is a mobile phone, PC, industrial computer widget. The market's way bigger than we thought. So we raised venture funding in 2014. We moved into an office, was looking around for the right space for us. And we were going to have 5 full-time people right away. So it was time to not just have an incubator space. And I met Bill Feenup. Do you know Bill?
I don't.
Okay. So Bill Feenup is the CTO of MHub. And he was starting, he's an MIT guy, formerly at IDEO. He's kind of like Tony Stark Iron Man, in real life. Yeah. And I met Bill because he was doing something he was calling Catalyze Chicago. And I wanted to see what it was. And it was this really small, 5,000 square foot maker space with a 3D printer in it and a laser etch machine and just some basic stuff. And I was like, you know what? I don't know how much use we're going to get out of this at this point. I sure wish I knew that this existed 2 years ago.
Right.
But let us rent in the same building as you, Bill. And he's like, I'll be your landlord. You'll be my subtenant. And so, great. So we met Bill and the other people that were doing that. And then World Business Chicago comes to Bill, and they're like, we like what you're doing, but we have a much, do you want to move from 5,000 square feet to 55,000 square feet on Chicago Avenue? There's this old Motorola facility. We're going to create this thing called MHub. So I become a board member of MHub. Bill becomes CTO of MHub. Haven comes in. Melissa comes in. And and now today it's moved again. Where we saw you where I run into you last time. 85,000 square foot, really premium facility. It's literally and figuratively a crown jewel now. It's the end of Fulton Market, where it dead ends into Ashland. There's this big, beautiful building with the big clock tower on it. It looks like a crown jewel physically. Yeah. And then the metaphorical crown jewel is that this is the place where, makers meet, or this is the place where hardware and hard technology intersects with entrepreneurs and established manufacturers. So much activity happens there. And, I talked earlier about 1871, what that does for digital products, MHub does for physical products and hard tech products. 100%. And both of them are super necessary. So through that, I had a board meeting today. I'm still on the board there. I had a board meeting today. The people I've gotten to meet through that, so it's one of those things where, again, I can't put my thumb on everything, but I always say Chicago has been a very supportive place to, I think, be an entrepreneur. Yep. It's also allowed me to build this hardware licensing company, but there's not that many of them in the world. There's Qualcomm, ARM, Dolby,
Right.
Interdigital. I mean, there's some, but it's like there's no center of nexus. It's not like you have to be in Silicon Valley or San Diego or Boston.
Right.
You can kind of do it where the talent is. For us, we have Motorola talent here.
Yep.
That's a good starting point. And then Shure, Knowles, you got these Shure microphones here. Like those are all good places for hardware development. And that's it's been a good enough place to be a hardware company. And it's been a great place to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah. No, I think that's fascinating. And, certainly, I would venture to guess you'd be successful if you weren't in Chicago and started this and went through it. But, in terms of kind of the ecosystem we have here, also what I think is interesting is just the economy that we have here really caters to that too, in my opinion, in the sense that if we're all 1871 and very focused on what's the next tech product that goes on my phone or the next app or even large software and things like that, yet we've got all the physical types of businesses, which pretty much everything else, but farming, agriculture, all the manufacturing, everything else, and the service that you guys are innovating really kind of sits in between a lot of that, right? Because you need engineers coming up with software and things like that to help optimize circuitry, I'd imagine. And then it sounds like all the prototyping that you're doing is pretty technical as well.
Yep.
But ultimately, it's getting to hardware type components, and so being in places that can connect all that seems to me to be an interesting space.
Yeah, I agree. I remember, our former mayor Rahm Emanuel, like one of his like stump speech that he would give when he was doing like a technology thing, like at Tech Nexus or whatever. He would always say like one of the things that makes Chicago so unique is that there's not one industry that's more than 14% of Chicago's GDP.
Yep.
And he's like, you just can't find, like New York has overweight finance. Northern California has overweight tech. Southern California has overweight entertainment. Like it's a blessing and a curse a little bit. Chicago doesn't have a single thing where we're really known.
Yeah.
But we have really strong finance with like private equity and then we have really good utilities businesses here, and we have enough tech, and then we have enough digital. There's a mix of the pie chart. It's just more balanced economy, I think, than the other ones. So
yeah, 100%. In fact, I might have been at the same event where he gave that speech.
Oh, I've heard it like 6 times.
Yeah. Everyone says it, including me. That the intro to this podcast says that.
Oh, really? That's so funny.
But it's amazing, and it's interesting because it comes
out. Is 14% the right number?
I've got 13%.
Oh man,
but it's close enough. It depends when it came out. What's the percentage point between points, right?
Yeah.
But what's also interesting, and so I did have someone in here talking through commercial real estate and kind of state of Chicago as a result. And one of the things he pointed out is because of that diversity, even though the downtown and the Loop and the commercial real estate space, I mean, everyone kind of knows the story, right? It took a hit. It's nowhere near as bad as it is in areas that are highly concentrated.
Sure.
And we're totally, he's relating it to Silicon Valley and things like that.
Yep.
So that diversity, just like, you can look at it as a benefit from so many ways in terms of, I want to be X when I grow up. You might be able to do it in Chicago. But just from a general economic perspective, it's kind of like a diversified portfolio, right?
Yep.
And so when things are taking hits, we're not blown out of the water, such as some of these other cities and things like that.
Yeah, I think I'm highly confident that you could apply your microbiology lens to that too. And you could see it in nature. I mean, you just know like diverse ecosystems, they're just more resilient. Like I think
100%.
Diverse is resilient. It might not produce the same concentration, can produce potentially greater outlying events, both bad and good.
Right.
But so when you have outlying positive events, which I think Silicon Valley has been really crafted to create those.
Right.
Like you get more supercharged multi-decacorn companies out of there than anywhere. But at the same time, you have, immensely more failures. You have, so I'm not saying one's right or wrong. I think what we do get in Chicago, and it's probably reflected in the culture of our city and our people here, is it's like it's just a resilient ecosystem because of the diversity of it.
Yeah.
So nothing really gets that opportunity to shine quite as bright.
Yeah.
Almost by design or just by, it's just the way it is.
Yeah, 100%. the edgy version of that is it's Chicago's grit, right?
Yeah. Big shoulders. What's the famous poem where they talk about like hog butcher for the world?
Yeah.
Insert that here. All right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we touched on Chicago, touched on NuCurrent, touched on your. I would touch a little bit more on your role because also while we were talking, you
Sure.
reminded me of all the other things that you're involved in. In terms of running a business like this,
Mm-hmm.
One question is, what's your day to day like? And I'm sure you're gonna get into emails and meetings and doing podcasts and things like
Yeah.
that. The question I wanted to ask is, what is something you spend a surprisingly large amount of time on?
Yeah. I had to think about this one a little bit because I could give you a generic answer, but I wanted to give you something that I wanted to think about it because this isn't a question I get. Most of the other questions I get a lot.
Yeah.
This one I don't get all the time. So what I think here is what I came down to is building relationships. And it's kind of a catch-all answer because any given time that could be building relationships with my team, with my customers, with partners, with competitors. It could be building relationships like the one you and I have, like the one I've been talking about with Terry and Fred, where it's like getting to know people in the ecosystem. So one day they ask you that really helpful question and it like unlocks something. So the thing about relationship building is it can't really be done super quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And you really can't even like, you don't want to try to put any kind of like ROI measures on those things because like what are you measuring like what you put into one relationship and what you get out? That's probably one, no good way to live, and two, it's probably not a good measure anyways, because it's really more about like all the relationships you build. Are you doing it the right way? Are you helping people when you can? Therefore, it will come back to you when you need help. The universe, the relationships, whatever, it will provide. And so I think board members, like there's just so many constituencies that I have to build relationships with, every day. And so that's what I spend, I would say, a majority of my time doing.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a good answer. And I obviously agree with you. And I also think it's interesting. I feel like I learned at a young age, you see someone that was well networked, right? And you're like, oh, I want to be networked, right? Because they know all these people and all these things. And then you take a step back and you're like, it's not that they know everyone, it's that they are constantly helping others any place that they can. And it sounds like especially if you're growing a company and getting started, I think there's a tendency for people to think about, well, I need that help, right? But what you end up learning in time is that is the ultimate pursuit. And even if you take a look at the business or the company that you're working at, for anyone, it's probably hopefully doing a service or a product that is helping others at the end result. And in most companies that is probably the case. And so helping others directly is kind of a way to kind of mainline what you're spending your day 9 to 5 doing. So yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think what's also interesting, to play this back to Chicago. Now, I will say I've never lived. I mean, I have lived part-time in other cities, but I've never spent more than 6 months in another city. But I do feel like the size of Chicago, it's big enough to have a large, influential group of people, but small enough that we used to call it the Kevin Bacon factor, right?
Yeah, sure.
Day, that you can navigate it. And I think because the community is so kind of Midwestern and supportive and things like that, that building relationships is a little bit accelerated because I think people are naturally aligned with that mindset.
Yeah.
Versus my perception of some other cities that might be a little bit more cutthroat with each other. So
yeah, I mean, I've lived in St. Louis. I've lived in like Bloomington for college and stuff. So I haven't really lived in many other cities. Milwaukee, I grew up in. So I'm a Midwest guy through and through. And we get told about that from other cities and maybe even other countries. My experience personally though has been I kind of think maybe the initial approach with people is different. So maybe in the Midwest, like the smile comes a little quicker, like when you're like meeting someone for the first time. The pleasantries are a little bit gentler, or more present. But I fundamentally think that like the more we have an international business. I spend time in China and Korea and Italy and the more I meet people, the more similar we really, people do want to help each other. Like it almost is, I think it's one of the most rewarding things for most people is it's like helping somebody else. My youngest daughter has a book. It's called "Did You Fill a Bucket Today?" And the whole concept is like they basically say everybody has an emotional bucket that they walk around with every day, and sometimes it's full and sometimes it's empty. And it's a concept for like, being gracious and nice to people and not bullying. Like that's what the moral is. But one of the things that they talk about is like and when your bucket's low, the best way to fill your own bucket is not by taking out of someone else's. It's actually by trying to fill theirs. When you fill someone else's bucket, yours gets full.
Yeah.
And I think like it's a simplified children's version of just saying, I think people are innately driven to want to help when they can. And so I think Chicago is a great place for that. I have a hard time suggesting that anywhere else is much different other than maybe the way you go about the introductions. Or I think if you're looking for help, you can find it and people will want to help you if you're good about it.
I think that's a great point. So speaking of people, folks in NuCurrent, what does a day in life do? What type of people are so clearly engineers are part of that? But what do you look for in terms of the people that you hire? What are some of the backgrounds? What are some things that they would be excited to do for anyone who was interested?
Yeah. So you kind of, right when you asked the question, I was like, I'm going to pivot on you, but you pivoted it yourself. So I was going to say, I'm not going to tell you about the engineers and salespeople and marketing. And you don't need to know the roles. That's not important.
Yeah.
What you need to know is that every person that works at NuCurrent kind of has a similar way of being. And it's extremely purposeful. And when we hire people, we hire in an order that's different than how most people hire in terms of what we prioritize. So the first thing we hire is cultural fit for a cultural fit. And that's probably like 70% of the weight of the entire decision. Are they the right cultural fit for us? Then capabilities, that's probably 20% of the weight. Like, do they have the horsepower to do it? Mm-hmm. Then third, like the last 10% is experience. Like, have they done something like this before? Can they draw off of their relationships or they've already built a device like this before? But that's like the last 10%. So in culture, like what we really look for people that like really want to solve problems. They're the type of person that they're definitely glass half empty. Half full. They see something and they say, hey, I can fill the rest of that glass. No one else has done it. That makes me want to do it more. And it's because we're such an innovation driven company that everybody has to be able to be innovative. I mean, this sounds bad. I don't want anyone to take this the wrong way. Even our CFO has to be innovative. Like usually you're like, all right, a controller, CFO, you need to, do it. Of course we apply GAAP rules, but like in a licensing business, there's just not that much precedent. And so even like, all right, well, this is a slightly different version of how we're going to collect royalties on this. And so how do you recognize the revenue and when do you recognize it? Like creativity and innovation has to be applied in even the least creative positions, like in your controller position. So creativity, problem solvers. And then the other thing we really look for, and you probably have this in your company, it's sometimes hard as you hire to continue to tap into the entrepreneurial spirit. Mm-hmm. We see this over and over with like founder driven companies, like, the super successful ones that, Steve Jobs or Schultz, I forget his first name, from Starbucks, Phil Knight from Nike. Yep. Like when they leave the companies, they go, but they suck. And then they have to come back and save them and they suck again. Right. And in like this perpetual cycle. And so you're trying to like harness this founder energy or this like, and so we try to distill what is that? And ultimately what we've narrowed it down to and what everyone at NuCurrent has a lot of is what we call ownership mentality. Yep. It's when you're hiring for it from someone fresh out or like young in their career, you're looking for someone who says, like when they talk about their projects, they are like taking it personally. Yeah. Like it wasn't like, so we'll ask a question. We'll say, what's like the hardest thing you've ever had to accomplish that you're like the most proud of? And we want to hear them like beam about it, but also say like, what did they do and how do they recruit others to help them do it? Because that's the type of thing entrepreneurs have to do. Yep. And so if you want people that have kind of that entrepreneurial vibe, even if they're not starting their own company, but they're joining your business, which is going to continue to change and grow and be creative, that's the other big thing we look for.
Yeah. No, that is awesome. It's interesting. Back in my consulting days, I was trained on critical behavior interviews, and we had without going into the whole process, that was my role in the interview process. And my favorite question was, I can ask a couple questions. Take your time to think about the answer. Tell me about a time that you led a team to failure. That's my favorite question. It's such a brutal one, right?
Yeah, that's a good one.
But it's interesting. And I always said, take your time to think of something, and it's either from your resume or if it's from another example. And then I'd also add in, I like that. And I appreciate that clearly you're a team player and you use the word we a lot. I'm going to look for the times you're using I. Like, you know.
You tell them that?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's interesting. And it throws people off a little bit. So maybe I shouldn't be asking that question. But it also gives a little bit of a permission slip for that person to showcase the pride and things like that.
I think that's, yeah.
And it's very I've found it helpful when interviewing folks that aren't used to showcasing themselves, right? So I'm not saying it's the best question.
That is a learned art. No, I really like the first question. The second question, where you're like, I'm looking for the word I as well. I think it is important, especially certain people and or certain maturity, like the balance of you don't want to. Are they being humble, or were they really just along for the ride?
Right.
And you kind of want to figure that out, and so you want them to say I when it's I or we when it's we.
Yeah,
so I like that.
And the ones when you know you've got someone that is an awesome team player, they will use the I, and they will always say, "But I required help from all these other folks like this." Like I did this part, but I got to be honest.
Couldn't have done it by myself. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's really interesting.
It reminds me of one of my favorite Barack Obama speeches. It was a controversial. It's the "You didn't build it" speech.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah, like I just think it's such a. It's like, yeah, you built a multi-billion-dollar company.
Yeah.
But you didn't do that alone. Where were your teachers? Where were your parents? Where was your community? Where was your church, your synagogue, or whatever it is? Like all those things matter. The roads that your taxes pay. Like, I think we do turn especially big entrepreneurs into heroes and stuff now, and they are to me. I look up to them and admire them, and I try to learn from them. But like, they all know, and everyone knows. It's not just them.
Right.
It can't be. It just literally can't be.
1,000%.
Yeah.
The good ones.
Yeah.
The successful ones, because that's the one thing when you're an entrepreneur, you when you first start off, you're ready to eat ramen soup every day and everything else. And the payoff is if you're successful, you don't get to do that anymore. Now you're responsible for everyone, right? And now you're working with others to grow them into those roles.
Which is something you have to. I mean, that's a transformation everyone has to go through.
Yeah, 100%. Awesome. So covered kind of the basis of the business. Cool. We talked a little bit about some of the by ways of backing into what is your role in the space. We talked about the types of clients that you're working with, that sort of thing. In terms of wireless in general, what are some things that we talked about? Wearables, we talked about glasses. What are some of the things that you think folks aren't thinking about that you are seeing on the horizon based on the perspective that you have? What are some of the things to be looking forward to?
Yeah, well, as far as market segments go, like the thing I'm most excited about is smart glasses, but we already talked about that. I'm also really interested, just from our business and the segments we're addressing most aggressively, is PC peripherals. So just like all the wire clutter around your desk and all the having to plug this in and remember when to charge that mouse or this keyboard or that camera, which there's just all this stuff around the PC ecosystem that needs charging. We're bringing that. We work with HP, we work with Logitech, and so you'll see these things coming. And then the other area is personal audio. So something that most people just aren't aware of. If you look at your AirPods or any other version of an earbud, you'll see physical metal contacts on those.
Yeah.
It's because that's when you drop them in the case, they have to touch, a plus and a minus contact, and they have to charge via, the same type of charging methodology that has been around for 130 years, just in a small form factor. So it's not a big pain for the user. Like, there are some allergies to that, so people can get, but that's not what we're really addressing. What we're addressing is that the reliability of those is the number one source of failure for these products.
Got it.
And what that means is that companies like Apple and Bose and Google, they put a lot of money into trying to mitigate the failure rates.
Yeah.
So these seemingly cheap, inexpensive pogo pins and pads is what we call them. They're actually costing a lot of money because of the manufacturing process steps, all the steps they're trying to take to make the failure rate less.
Yeah.
But what they're really just doing is, it's like holding up a bridge with, duct tape. Like, it's gonna still, they're not fixing the problem. They're just like reinforcing it a little bit here and there. So I'm excited about what we're doing in that space to completely encapsulate and seal up earbuds, headphones, so that, like, why not wear them swimming? Like,
Right.
Why not be able to do more with them, make them, less expensive, because you can take all this failure rates out of the cost equation for profitability. So those are the biggest product areas. Is there a different way you want me to address it, or is the segments a good?
I think segments is probably maybe the most relatable thing. So I think maybe the last question we can kind of wind up with, because you are in such an innovative space, I want to call back to something that may or may not be a part of the show. As I was talking about a niece of mine movie, like, I'd hire her, and it was based on someone who's ready to go, looking to do. I'm gonna guess there's something to do with the Northwestern piece in there too, maybe with the all mater.
Wait, did she go to the Northwestern?
Yeah.
No, I don't want her
Okay.
anymore. Too highfalutin for me. No, I'm just kidding. But no, I didn't. When we talked about it before, what I was going on was she had done that New York Teacher Fellows.
That's right.
And that she was like ambitious, and she just wanted to learn and sink her teeth into something juicy.
Yeah.
Remember what I said we look for?
Yeah.
People that want to solve problems. People are like, I haven't seen it done before, but I can get it done. People that want to take ownership. And I know that if she led a classroom of kids, like when she was like 20 years old, 21 years old, like there's no, like I did Teach for America. And what I learned is there is no job that I can think of where you go from being an undergraduate to managing 30 people at a time, in my case, with 5 different classes a day. So 150 different kids a day came through my classroom. And like the management responsibility of like maintaining a classroom, teaching these kids, developing curriculum, it's like, holy cow, you can go to McKinsey and like they'll teach you like the right frameworks, but like you don't know how to manage. Like you know how to put pitch decks together with good frameworks. So that's why I was like, I'd hire her. Like, is she still available?
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm also we've hired a lot of teachers into our group too that didn't have background for the exact same reason. I was also raised by a teacher. So to me, I saw kind of the resilience and the creativity that kind of.
Absolutely.
But you got to want it in that, so you got to love what you do.
Yeah. I'm not trying to poach teachers though, because they do an important job.
Yeah.
But when people are like, I'm going to teach for a couple of years and my plan is to go into industry, please send me your resumes. So
for the teachers who are no longer teachers or aspirational people that are hitting that 70% mark of the culture fit, what are some places that people can learn a little bit more about wireless technology and things like that to kind of get some interest into the space if they're preparing to try to apply for a job in NuCurrent? Yeah, I mean, we have a career part of our website, so that would be helpful for them. If it's about jobs, if they just want to kind of like hear more about the technology, or maybe if they were interested in something I talked about today and they wanted to like hear more about it, maybe with a more sciencey angle or an engineering angle, we have a YouTube channel. It's just, YouTube.com/NuCurrent, and then we organize it by different types of technology. Yep. So it's a place where you can go and get, usually 2 to 8 minute videos about different technologies. So if anyone's curious, that would be a good place to check it out. But yeah, of course, our job website and LinkedIn are always good places to look to for the job side. That's awesome. And then I think we'll probably wrap up with that. You mentioned kind of during this conversation that there's some exciting stuff coming out. I have to imagine you're in all kinds of NDAs and things like that. Mm-hmm. So without disclosing what those are, where would be great places for people to kind of see what's coming out in the new space that your team is involved in?
Yeah, I mean, if you follow that, if you go to the YouTube or you follow us on LinkedIn, I mean, you'll hear the news when we're allowed to share it.
Yeah.
So yeah, we don't really get to talk. These are really big product announcements from very large companies, and so the last thing we're going to do is blow their cover and like,
Yeah.
like what am I going to do? Speak to my 5,000 person audience like when they have like 50 million people following them. Like it's like I'll let them break the news. Like they might have a louder blowhorn than I do. So, but we do as far as timing goes, there'll be, before it gets warm here in Chicago again, there'll be 2 major international product launches. That'll be quite exciting. We'll talk about those. And then over the rest of the year, there'll be 3 more. And the reason I know those things is because it takes a long time to build these products. And so we've been working on these for a year, sometimes 2 years. So like, it's to the point where like our work is dwindling because the technology's done.
Yeah.
Now it's like marketing, go to market, getting the channels ready, getting the products built. And so they're switching into different modes, which is an interesting time for us because we like spend so much time working on a product and then we wait like 6 months and then it comes and then it's really exciting.
I've experienced that in many cases as well. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Jacob, thanks so much for the time. I know you're busy
happy
guy,
to do it.
And
thanks for inviting me.
Yeah.
Awesome.
All right.
All right.